Висше училище в Срядци, наречено е именем присно блажена его учителя българскаего Климента Охридскаего, повядава във все хондоштво физическаего учение, еже съвършила ест професор Жерар Муру, държени маздон Нобела, съчувствием глашаята его, весано почета на его доктора, висше его училища Климента Охридскаего. В Срядци, мясенца февраля, 90 на его валято седмата и соншно е, и пентасътно е, и 90 е, и 8 е от сътворения миро. Universitas literarum Serdicensis, nomine Sancti Clementis Acridensis, ex sententia facultatis scientiarum physicarum, virum eminentissimum atque reverendissimum premio Nobelianum laureatum, professorem doctorem Gerard Albert Mourou, doctorem honoris causa scientiarum physicarum Universitatis Serdicensis nominavit atque declaravit. In eiusque rei fidem hoc diploma sigillo maiore Universitatis Roboratum et consuetis subscriptionibus munitum ei dandum coravit. Datum Serdice ante diem quintum calendas Martias anno Domini bis millesimo vicesimo.
Mr. Director, Son Excellence, Madame l'Ambassadrice France, Mr. Professors and students, finally, dear friends, it's a great honor to be in this beautiful aula, to receive this doctorate honoris causa from great University of Sofia, University of Sofia. I'm going to now present my the work which really gave me this Nobel Prize that I had to share with Donna Strickland, my former student. Do we have it? Oh, yes. Okay. So, thank you. As I said, this is really, we got a Nobel Prize, because we invented the technique which made possible really to accelerate particles to extremely high energy. And also could make possible also to have application in the medical world, application in ophthalmology, for instance, with 20 million now patients, who got these procedures. So I'm going to give you a tour of this activity a little bit. So here we are with Donna, and sorry, here we have with, can I have a pointer? Is it possible to have a pointer? I can do without it, but it's better if you could find the pointer, yes. So anyway, here we are really together enjoying this intense moment, when you get the Nobel Prize in Stockholm. So I have to say that I was particularly, of course, when I get the phone call, from the chair of the Nobel Prize Committee, that I was a recipient of this physics prize. Of course, I was absolutely thrilled. But the pleasure were decoupled when the Nobel Prize, the chairman of the Nobel Prize, told me that I was going to share it with my student, Donna Strickland. And that was very important because, as I said yesterday, Nobel Prize is 120 years old. About hundreds, more than hundreds, of course, they got the prize, but mostly men. 100 men got the Nobel Prize before me. And, but only 3 women got the Nobel Prize, or two women got the Nobel Prize before Donna, Marie Curie, and also Maya Gopper-Mayer, and Donna Strickland. She was my student. What an honor. And so I was really, very touched by this. And anyway, so let me tell you a little bit about extreme light and my passion for extreme. So now I have to, no? Okay, I have to. Yes. So, this is a light bulb, right? And it emits incoherent light. This is a laser which emits, for the first time, coherent light. Incoherent light was with us for 13.8 billion years. This coherent light was invented only in 1960 and is about 60 years old now. And this, this was demonstrated by this gentleman, Ted Mayman, for US aircraft, and in May 16, 1960, in the afternoon, exactly. And and now what is amazing about light, and you understand why when people in physics or people love to work with lasers, is the fact that, you can use light, for instance, to slow down atoms. This is done very well. In fact, I'm very pleased to say that, by, not only by, but by people like Cohen Tanuji or Serge Roche, or also Alain Aspect. in France, okay? Many also in other countries. Very, very fashionable field. We call that, you know, cooling atoms. Now, the other thing that you can do, I mean, you can, in fact, slow down particles to extremely, almost to a rest. So the temperature of these particles are very, very low, 10 minus 8 Kelvin. But what is fascinating, you can use the same light, okay? Same light to accelerate particles to the other boundary, which is the speed of light. So you have a speed of 0, okay, this is 1, and the speed of light, you know, which you know that you cannot really exceed. And this is what we can do with ultra-high intensity lasers, with, you know, this extreme light. And so the particles can really go to GeV easily now, and we are aiming at TeV and maybe PeV in order to really try to recreate some what is happening in space, notably. So this is really, of course, very, very exciting. You see that you have what we have 25 orders of magnitude. Take 1 electron volt photons, and you can go to 10 to micro electron volt or pico electron volt, okay, by loading, or you can go to GeV, TeV. So it's 25 order of magnitude with 1 EV. So it's phenomenal. So that covers an enormous range of possibilities. Now, light can be emitted by the laser in a, what we call continuous wave, okay, CW, or by pulses, okay? By pulses, you can make very, very short pulses, and we can pulses now that we can produce current. Very, you know, commonly is pulses in a 10 femtosecond, and during this time is a milliardium of millioniem of a second, and the light only travels micrometers. So this is very short, you know. And so you can use these short pulses, of course, to study rapid, you know, phenomena, like motions of atoms and things like this. You can freeze their motions, you know. Or you can do it, you know, and this is where we came with Donna, is what we can use. We can produce phenomenal peak power. Power, you know, in what we call petawatt range. Power which is about 1,000 times the total power of the global grid for 1 femtosecond, of course, okay? And so this is very easy because you can produce this only with 1 joule energy, which is really very minuscule amount of energy. And but if you produce 1 joule in 10 minus 15 seconds, you produce power 1,000 times the grid power. Okay, so this is really fascinating. Okay, I've always been fascinated by this. Okay, and of course, if you have very short pulse like this, very intense, then you can use what we call the radiation pressure of light and produce phenomenal pressures. I'm sorry for this. pressures, pressures which is equivalent to millions times the mass of the Eiffel Tower on the tip of your finger. So this is the largest pressure that we can produce, in fact. It is with light, okay? You would not expect that when you think about light. So, so now, the fact that we can accelerate particles, produce these high energy particles, now you are also going to change regimes. You basically before the laser was before high intensity laser, it was basically devoted to atomic physics, okay, electron volt physics. Now with these ultra high intensities, we can go really to the subatomic world. To this, we can study the physics of nuclei and protons and quarks. Not at the moment, but we will be able to. Okay? So this is fascinating. This is this 25 order of magnitude, you know, I was talking about. So now this represents intensities as a function of years. At the beginning, when Ted Naiman, produced this light, the intensity was not exceeding 10 to the 8 watt per square centimeter, which was at the time, of course, very, very high. Okay. But anyway, after that, we're working on the laser. We were able to demonstrate technique of like Q switching, more locking, and so on. So the power, increases, and then we hit a plateau. And this plateau lasted about 20 years. We were at a 10 to the 14 watt per square centimeter or so. And then this plateau stopped with the advent of chair pulse amplification, the technique that we invented with Donna. And that, from now on, we are increasing the power of the intensity of light that we can generate is increasing by orders and orders of magnitude, by 10 orders of magnitude. So of course, when you are changing things by 10 orders of magnitude, you are discovering new regimes. And so we will go a little bit through this new regime. The first regime was the possibility of accelerate particles, to accelerate particles to relativistic velocity, or the yellow band is, we can do that also with protons, which are 1,000 times, heavier than electrons. And then we come to a regime which on top one, after the yellow one, at the end of the yellow one, this is a regime that we always, it's our graal. I dreamed about this for more than 30 years. The regime where you can really break down the vacuum. Okay? You can boil the vacuum, in this component. And in fact, you can materialize light. Okay? So this is the type of, things we will be able to do with the projects like ELI and so on. Okay, the reason that we stopped, we had this plateau, is because of this, when you increase the intensity, of laser, what happens is the index of refraction is changing. Normally, the index of refraction is a constant, okay? For one wavelength, right? It's a constant. Now it's not true. With intensity, as you increase the intensity, the index of refraction becomes intensity dependent. And if, let's say, you want to amplify light, that is, you come with a short pulse that you can want to amplify it, if the pulse is not smooth, then you are going to have special frequencies which are going to be enhanced dramatically. And this special frequency, as you can see, is going to lead to spikes. And you are going to destroy, the material you are traversing. And so, in order to, and that's the reason why light, amplification of light stopped at 10 to the 14 watt per square centimeter, because we had this problem. Now, how could we were able really to circumvent this problem by this technique of chirp pulse amplification? I'm going to describe it. It was very, very simple. After the fact, everything is simple. But so you take a short pulse that you want to amplify, and then because the pulse is short, it has a lot of frequencies, a lot of wavelengths. Like Joseph Fourier, told us that. Okay? And so all this wavelength is going to be dispersed by what we call gratings, dispersive elements. So so in a way that the blue and the red part of the spectrum are going to travel different distances. Okay? So you will, in fact, stretch the pulse. Okay, these short pulses, the micrometer in duration, will be stretched to a foot. So. And then when the pulse is stretched, of course, the intensity will be lowered, and as the intensity will be lowered by a great amount, like 1,000,000 times, you will be able to extract 1,000,000 times better the energy from your amplifier. And when you have done that, then you use the same grading pairs, but with a different kind of architectures, and you are going to put all these colors back together, okay? And you are going to reconstitute these very, very short pulses. And now, but this pulse now will be gigantic, okay? And that is the trick. Okay. And Donna made his PhD. He got from her PhD, got a Nobel Prize. Pretty good. Okay, so now let's talk about application. I'm going to start with the easy one. Okay, machining. You know that lasers, is used, in machines. Okay, for instance, you can use continuous wave lasers, but when you do this, you cannot machine very well with continuous wave, because what you are doing, you are heating large volumes, and when you want to micro machine, you want really to raise the temperature a lot, but a very small amount. So if you have nanosecond pulse, shorter pulse, a millionth of a second, you can really now heat up only a small fractions, raise the temperature, and here again you are going to elevate the temperature to ebullitions, and so you are going to create the plasmas and create, some features. Now, if you are doing with laser femtosecond, this is very, very, what happened is dramatic, because the heat doesn't have the time to propagate. So you are going to deposit the temperature, deposit your energy over a very, very teeny tiny amount of volumes. And these small volumes will have enormous temperature, and so you will be able to really blast, the material away. And so this is, for instance, for a long, is long pulse for us, it's nanoseconds, a million of a second, but it's long pulse. And you see, if you really want to drill a hole, it's not very nice, okay? But if you are using femtosecond, this is what you get, okay? There you get with absolutely pristine, edges, and very accurate. So, and you can do that in any kind of material because there is nothing which can really withstand really the power that we can inflict to the material. So this is, in ceramic, in glasses, in name. Now there's another also property is the fact that you can, it's light. So these short pulses can go through, be transmitted by transparent material like glass. Okay? So what you can do, you can really focus the beam within the volumes of the material and just raise the temperature only at the central part of the beams, what we call the west, okay? We can really raise the temperature and do the ablations only in these teeny tiny part volumes. And this is what we are going to use in eye surgery, which was discovered, in fact, by accident. I'm not going to tell about the story, but anyway, so for instance, you can really use, and this is being done for millions of patients a year, okay? Because patients sometimes need to be, their vision need to be corrected. So the cornea, where really you have most of the power, the cornea needs to be changed, the shape of the cornea needs to be changed. So we can really create flaps and correct for the vision, okay? So, as I said, 24 million now, since 2001, got these procedures. It's very, okay, now, we are going now to the green area, okay? The green area is obtained as we increase the intensity, of course. And as we increase the intensity, for the first time in optics, what we are able to is to take these electrons, which are dancing around the nucleus, okay, and the electric force of the laser, like electromagnetic force of the laser now, is going to change the velocity of these electrons to velocity near the speed of light. So the mass of this electron now is going to change. And plus that in optics until this regime, you always consider the electric field. You never really consider the electromagnetic field, the magnetic part. Because now we can, the electric and magnetic field are going to be the same. This is what I want to, I'm sorry for some of the mistake here. But here is the electromagnetic field, the field which is composed of electric vectors and magnetic vectors, and they are moving at the frequency of 10 to the 14 Hertz, 15 Hertz. So when the intensity is small, below 10 to the 18 watt per square centimeter, the electrons accelerated goes perpendicular to the propagation direction of it. Now when we are going over this, this 10 to the 18 or so watt per square centimeter, now it's not the case anymore, because the force applied to the electrons is V over C cross B, vectorial B, okay? And the reason why in optics we always neglect the magnetic field is the fact that we have this V over C, which is very, very small, okay? So this term we neglected, okay? It's always the case. Now, in our case, it's not the case anymore. B over C is close to 1, okay? So BAE now becomes equal, okay? So now the electrons are not going to be going parallel, perpendicular to the propagation direction, but the electrons are going now along the propagation. Okay? And so this, of course, changes everything. So now, in order to go very high in intensity, you have two choices. You know, the power is energy divided by time. Okay? So you can decide to increase the energy for a given pulse duration. We can increase the power. This is what we have done so far. Okay? Notably in the ELI facilities, very large system, petawatt systems. Because they are large because we increase the power, increase the energy. But you have, if you can, of course, the other way would be to keep the energy constant, I mean low, and compress the pulse. And so we are exploring both ways, and we can compress the pulse now to basically almost single cycle. And you will see that now we can go, in fact, well beyond, not in femtosecond, but into the attosecond and also into the zetosecond. Okay? So what we are using when I mean, I'm going very fast, okay, I'm sorry. But how can you make, how can you compress pulses? Okay? Well, there's a very simple way. Okay, if the pulse, you start with intensity, very high intensities, you can take your short pulse, here we see a single cycle pulse, and really you send the pulse on the target, and here what's going to happen is, the light pressure, which is intense, is going to push the electrons forward, and you are going to make a curved mirror. Okay? But also what you are going to do, you are going to separate the electrons and the ions, so negative and positive. So you are going to have a huge, you are going to make a huge electric field, DC electric. And this DC electric field now are going to bring back, this electron back, and they are going to do that. It's going to see, but now the electrons are moving back, and now it moves the electron at the speed, near the speed of light, okay, with very large gamma. And if you do that, you can convince yourself this leads to compression. You have a mirror which goes near the speed of light. And if you have your pulse going at the speed of light, the reflected pulse are going to be compressed. And it will be compressed by the Lorentz factor. Okay, so this is what we are going. We have already demonstrated this. So we are now in 50 attoseconds or so with high intensity, okay? High energy. So this is just the duration of the pulse. This is quite fascinating, okay? Because you will see. So you see that the pulse, in the attoseconds, as a function of the intensities, and you can really produce short pulses, 600 attoseconds over A naught, I mean, factor, I'm going to. The higher the intensity, the shorter the pulse will be compressed. And it will be compressed so much that now you start from the visible and you will go to the X-ray and the gamma ray. So this is maybe, but this, if you are pushing the simulations, this is what you find. You find that if you really the intensity of your intensity of the pulse that you want to compress is high enough, then you go into the zeptosecond regime. Now the zeptosecond regime, the period of the zeptosecond regime, it's in gamma ray regime. And it's a single cycle as well, so it's fully coherent. And that opens absolutely doors, wide open. Okay. So anyway, so this is, I told you a little bit how we what I call my shortcut, okay, we'll be able, I hope, using this technique, to go in and maybe go over the materialization of light. Okay, with laser. Okay, now, one big application is of these high-intensity lasers is the possibility to accelerate particles or electrons, start with electrons, with very, very high gradient, okay? Very efficient. And so that was demonstrated, or proposed, we'll say, proposed by my good friend Toshi Tajima, okay, and Dawson in 79. And the trick is, you take a laser pulse and you focus this laser pulse into a gas jet, so you're ionizing the medium, and so you're making a plasma, kind of a soup of electrons and protons. And you are making this plasma wave, and in this plasma wave, these electrons are going to fall in this plasma wave and are going to really go because plasma wave is formed at the speed of light, so the electrons are going to be dragged at the speed of light. And what is phenomenal, and you can, with really very, very relatively, I would say, garden variety lasers, high-intensity laser, you can do this experiment. And because, the reason why, of course, Tajima and Dawson had to wait is because they didn't have the laser, the high-intensity laser. Okay. So as the laser, high-intensity laser came along, of course, now we could do this experiment and demonstrate that we can really now produce beams of particles with energy of GeV per centimeter. Okay, maybe GeV per centimeter doesn't really impress you, because, and likely so, this is, but it's enormous. It's enormous. If you take, for instance, a conventional accelerator like synchrotron, like this is Soleil, it's a 3 GeV systems on the plateau de Saclay. And it's a 3 GeV system, but it's not 3 centimeters. Okay? It's not 3 centimeters. And now we can really do, now we can really produce GeV electrons over really a mere centimeter. Now, you see that we are going to do even much better. That's the reason why it's very exciting. This is the CERN LHC, Large Hadron Colliders, 27 kilometers. To take the protons to particles to TeV, tera electron volt regime, and to demonstrate the Higgs, for instance. Although, I mean, they started at 10. We don't need that now, but it was TeV, okay, to do that. The reason why it's 27 kilometers is because the standard technology is really megavolt per centimeter acceleration. If you are using, of course, now Wakefield, there's a Wakefield acceleration, you should really be able to put it on a, you have a size of about 100 meters. Now, of course, you know, you can imagine these 27 meters. These 27 meters are, you know, a huge amount of engineering work to do this tunnel of 27 kilometers. Plus, it's full, of course, of equipment at cryogenic temperature because the accelerator are cooled at cryogenic temperature. So very, but if you are using Wakefield, it should be in a range of hundreds of meters. Now, if you are using short pulses that I discussed about, you know, where it's emitted in the X-ray regime, now we could really do the Wakefield in solid and now get a TeV per centimeter. Okay, so you have CERN on your finger. Okay? So this is really, of course, very exciting. Now, okay, let me talk to you about some application of accelerations. I will mention very quickly this black hole analog that you can produce. I will also, but in medical also, you will see that accelerators are widely used, okay? And I will mention to you. The other one that really, which is really very, very important is using this extreme light, okay, this technology for the environment. Mention that, and also in spatial, in space debris. Now let's talk about black holes. Turns out that, you know, there is, we are able, you know, over attosecond, you know, to take particles to the speed of light, very, very close to the speed of light. Okay? And which means that, you do the math, immediately you realize that it is enormous acceleration, enormous acceleration. And then if you think about, you know, the equivalent principle, Einstein equivalent principle, which says, you know, gravity is equivalent to acceleration, okay? That means, wow, I mean, this acceleration, this incredible acceleration, also is analog to a black hole. And so you can make black hole analogs this way, by this incredible acceleration. And you can try to understand something that which is right now we don't understand, is this black hole information loss in black holes and so on. One thing is, you know, it's nice to, if you see a black hole last 10 to the 65 years, okay? So if you want to make one, you know, or if you want to work on one, you see, you have to be patient because our universe was created only 10 to the 14 years ago. So this is, but anyway, this is one, I won't try to mention that we will be able really to make cosmology on the table. This is my goal. Okay, now we go in serious applications also. We can now, because we can utilize this incredible pressure of light to accelerate not only electrons but protons. Okay? This is very easy. We have a very thin film of elements, targets, and so you are going to, with this light pressure comes, pushing the electrons, and the massive protons are going to stay behind, and you are going to produce a burst, a short burst of protons. And protons, and it's very exciting here, because if you are using very short pulse to do this job, okay, then you becomes extremely efficient. Okay, you can produce protons with energy in a GeV, gamma electron, giga electron volt. Okay, so if you are using long pulses, you see, you can do much less efficient. But if you are a single cycle, you are becoming very efficient, and you can produce GeV protons. Now, this is, just to give you the idea, this, you're replacing this thin film, and of course you have your laser, but it's not really we know how to do it now very simply. But this is a GeV accelerator, okay? Proton accelerator. So you see that it's big, about 600 meters in length, and it costs a lot of money. Okay? This is for the Project Mirage. So you see immediately, you have a sense that you say, okay, now, we'll be able really to produce these protons, and for the medicals and for the environment, in a very simple manner. So application in medicine, if you want really to do this proton therapy, which is kind of really the therapy of choice, is as opposed to electron therapy or X-ray therapies, where electron therapy, X-ray therapies, when you are focusing your beams, in a tumor, to kill the tumor and to burn the tumor, then you're also burning the healthy tissues which are in front. But with protons, not the same. Protons, they stopped at what we call a given distance, which is called the bright peak. Okay? So you can adjust the distance by adjusting the energy of your proton. And then, of course, you can also produce radionuclide, and you can implant this radionuclide in a patient, but radionuclide can be produced in the hospital now. Okay? Almost, maybe exaggerating, but near the patient's bed. Okay? Then you need also nuclear diagnostics. So this radioisotope can be produced in the hospital. You don't have to be produced somewhere in reactors and be out to the hospital. And so now there is also this very important application. This is, of course, the productions of clean energy. We know that we don't have now a way to produce clean energy. Okay, the clean energy now you know, we need, of course, this is the problem number one we have, okay? Because we rely so much on energy. So we have to be able to make energy, to produce energy without destroying the planet, okay? And so I'm going to show you maybe now the fact we can produce these particles, these protons, you know, relativistic protons and so on. You can think about now using them to produce a new way to produce, in a way, nuclear energy. And nuclear energy, of course, it is something which is doesn't produce CO2, carbon dioxide. Okay? And you have an ample amount of, in case of thorium, thorium is all over the place, large quantities. Okay? So you don't have, it's not really in dedicated place, and so we have all these conflicts which are produced by the localizations of the energy in the world. And then also, once in the case of uraniums, you know, if you are not using thorium, you are using uranium, you have to burn the minor actinides. So I'm just going to go through quickly to that. Yes, there's something that people have to have in mind, okay? You take a typical gigawatt power plant, okay? For, say, for a million, a city of 1 million people, okay? You must have nearby a gigawatt power plant. The energy is 8 billion kilowatt hours per year, okay? This energy really equivalent to 100 grains of 130 cars of coal, 3 million tons of coal. And I can let you do the math, you know, that corresponds to a huge amount of carbon dioxide. Now, if you are doing uraniums, you go nuclear, and right now there's only nuclear power produced by uranium. You do better, okay? You're much better because now you are not 3 million tons, but you are 300 tons of uranium, okay? And 0 liter of carbon dioxide. Now, if you are using thorium, which is really a miracle, I think, is you only needed 1 ton of thorium, okay? So this is, and plus thorium has the advantage that it's very abundant, much more abundant than uranium. And it's all over, okay? And also, it doesn't produce a very, very small amount of nuclear waste as opposed to uranium. So, of course, this is something we should really, really consider. As scientists, you know, we have really to look at the possibility of trying to switch uranium by thorium. Something which was decided in the 50s when uranium was chosen, and at that time it was chosen because over the thorium, it was chosen because uranium you can produce plutonium. With plutonium you can produce atomic bomb. You cannot do that with thorium. And so now if you have, how can I use, you know, now these lasers? I'm going to use my high intensity laser, okay, to produce photons, like I said. And but for nuclear power, you need neutrons, okay. So you can use these protons that you can see, you know, just after we focus the beam of the lasers, you know, hit the target, produce protons, you know, relativistic protons, and now you go into a block of lead or something like this. People, nuclear physicists know that by heart. And you can produce now neutrons. You can produce neutrons at a rate of 30 neutrons per protons. But they have to be near GeV protons. And then you can use these protons now really to prime control your reactors. Okay. So now the other also application about these neutrons that we can produce with the laser is to do transmutations of nuclear waste. In this case, a nuclear waste which is really produced, minor actinide, what we call nuclear waste, minor actinide, and the neptunium, curium, americium, plutonium, they have lifetimes, very long lifetimes. And so they really are bad guys. And so how we like to transmute them, we like to get rid of them. And you can do that by fissioning the nucleus. And if you fission the nucleus, the lifetimes of this actinide goes from 2 million years, in the case of neptunium, to minutes, days. So this is, of course, this is something that we have to. Yeah, now very quickly, now how are we doing by times? And well, will be 5 minutes? Okay, good. Do you agree? Okay. So one thing that you know, that the space age started with the Sputnik in 1957, and I remember that day. And since the first Sputnik, of course, we launched the equivalent of 4 Eiffel Tower in space. And of course, every time when we launch, satellites and so on, we are producing enormous amount of debris. So now you have billions of debris going from centimeter size or a sub-centimeter size to meter size, okay? Circling, around the black planet at 15 times, it's 15 kilometers per second. So it's 10 times the speed of the fastest bullet, okay? So if you get some of this debris at that speed, this, as I like to say, ruins your day, okay? So now, of course, now on this 28 million thousand tons, about half the Eiffel Tower is still under the form of debris. So it's a serious problem. It's a serious problem because, as you know, we are going to send now not one satellite at a time. We will do it 1,000 times, 1,000 satellites at a time. And so we need to take care of these problems. And so now, okay, now I have this movie that I couldn't show you yesterday. It's about a story to illustrate the debris activity. It's about a story that happened in 1957 when the Chinese sent in space a missile to destroy one of their own satellites, a military exercise. By doing that, they destroyed the satellite, a success, but they produced huge amount, millions of debris. Okay. The Indians, by the way, about a year ago, did the same thing. Okay. So now, so you have all these debris, so how are you going to get rid of them? How are you going to clean the space, these debris? So I propose we were with Marcel in the movie, so this this Gravity movie, very good movie, and came out from the cinema and said, well, I know how to take care of this. And so what we will do is, and this now is accepted and so on, right? No problem with this. And so the idea now is try to use one of these high-intensity lasers, but the small version, okay, not the big version, but the small one, which really send rapid bullets of light. And so when we see a debris, we send the bullet toward the debris, and we try to ablate one part of the debris. We have to be very careful, because if you destroy the debris, you are going to make more debris, okay? So you cannot do that. So, but if you just nudge, I mean, you are going to produce, ablate small fraction of the debris, and then this ablations that you are going to produce is going to produce rocket effect. And this rocket effect is going to change the trajectory of the debris, and the debris will go into the atmosphere and get burned. So this is, now, so I'm going to show you that. And so you will see also one of the lasers that we are developing at the École Polytechnique, which is based on fiber lasers. Because why fiber lasers? Because we have to worry very much about high average power, efficiency, so on. And that's the best architecture. So let's start now about this. So you see that, so you saw the satellite which was blown away, and now the debris going, one of the debris, and so now we are going to spot this debris and shoot at the debris, and here we are going to produce these ablations, and this ablation is going to change the trajectory of so that is the end of this clip. It's also I think so still now. Just want to conclude by saying that, of course, we have people say, when you get the Nobel Prize, what do you feel? You feel responsibilities. You are happy, and you feel responsibility. Say, certainly. We feel the responsibility, for instance, because it gives you the power to have a little access. To people and talk to people. And one example is meeting with the Pope. Okay? With Dana Strickland, we are talking about these problems of nuclear waste, problem of energy. And the Pope wrote this beautiful encyclica, which is called Laudato Si, where he described the problem of the planets and possible a way to correct or mistake we are doing. And this is what we are talking, and we describe with Pope the questions of getting rid of the transmitting the debris. So it was a great moment. So in conclusions, I will say that, with extreme light, we are capable of generating the largest field, the largest acceleration, the largest temperature, and the largest pressure. And in the spirit of Alfred Nobel, it carries the best hope and opportunity for the future of science and technology. The motto of Nobel is for the greatest benefit of humankind. And I think that's it. Oh, I'm going to skip that. Yeah. So thank you very much.
What is the feeling to be recognized as a Doctor Honoris here in Sophia University?
Well, it's absolutely a great feeling. It is a very great feeling because I have some good friends. Unfortunately, one of my best friends was Professor Soltier, who died 10 years ago, 13 years ago. You know, he was not here. But yes, it's a very prestigious university, and receiving, the highest honor is always nice, of course.
Tell us more about your work that brings you the Nobel Prize in 2018.
Yeah. Well, what we have been doing is trying to to produce a very, very high peak power light, very high, and not to destroy things, okay, but to really to investigate scientific problems, and also to make possible trying to solve the problem of the world, like the generation of new type of energy. Okay, and you know that is one of the main questions, one of the most important problems of our society is we don't know how to produce energy without destroying the planet.
When you start with physics, and what was your first work with physics?
Oh, when I started, it was laser. It was laser because when I started physics, it was just the very, very beginning of the laser. And I had the luck, the chance to be in a laboratory, you know, which were doing lasers. But of course, at that times, they are not like they are now, okay? They were very primitive. And I was happy during my 52 years of activity to have contributed to improve the laser.
Tell us more about your project, the Extreme Light infrastructure, and what is the Bulgarian role in it?
Yes, this is very important. You know, when we started this project, when I started this project, basically we were 4 countries, 4 emerging countries from Europe. It was Czech Republic, it was Romania, it was Hungary, and also Bulgaria. But few years after we started, we wrote a proposal and so on. We were selected. Okay, we were selected to be in a roadmap. Professor Soltier died, and he was a champion of the Bulgarian team. And so things didn't. After that, only Romania, Hungary, and Czech Republic, been left. So now we would like very, very much, after 10 years, to see Bulgaria joining the rank.
And tell us more about the method of water pulses which you work for.
I'm sorry?
The method for water pulses.
I'm sorry?
Method for laser pulses.
Oh, the method. Okay, yeah. The idea is really try to get very high peak power, but during a very, very short time. We try to produce, if you produce a small amount of energy, but in extremely short time, like in our case is billionth of a millionth of a second, 10 minus 15 seconds. But if you can produce a small amount of energy, you are producing very, very high power, And to do that, we had to come up with a technique where we are taking a short pulse in a femtosecond time scale, very short, and we are going to stretch it by a million times. And then after we amplify the pulse, now million times better because we reduce the intensity by a million times, and then we recompress the pulse. Okay, and yeah. So that was.
Thank you very much for this interview. Congratulations once again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.